occupation for young children and people. And now I'm engaged in different projects next to third spaces and mandates, mostly dealing with bringing together the public sector and private participation, but also facilitating cultural development processes in towns and regions. And this aspect of stimulating cultural development is also a main idea of the Third Places program that was started last year in North Rhine-Westphalia by the Culture Ministry. And its aim is to achieve a better balance between the living conditions and especially the cultural infrastructure of urban and rural areas. And at the same time, it tries to give an answer to the fact, as in many small towns, there are very often no longer spaces just to meet and gather and communicate without consuming anything. This program, Third Places, provides funding for either the creation of new cultural centers or for developing existing cultural centers further. They have to be situated in a central place for this town to be easily accessible for anybody. They have to have extended opening hours. For example, libraries are made Third Places too, then they have to extend their opening hours. And they have to have a nice inviting atmosphere. But they also have to offer a cultural program and provide space for meeting. The creation process and the development of these centers is hopefully organized by many people, by a network of different partners playing together, the private and the public sector. And this has to, it aims to be sustainable for a long time. And it is meant to be built so that all these people involved are taking responsibilities for the place. So it's really a group activity already in the conceptual phase. That's very important. So it really means this program brings together the public and private sector, the professionals, the semi-professionals, the civic society, and it wants to make it their place.
Right, thank you, Ina. Fantastic example, and we are only wishing that many countries, much more countries and places open such kind of vibrancy between the people, the communities, the sectors, and also contribute to the culture-led regeneration policies. Very nice, thank you.
Francois?
Yes. Thank you, everybody. I'm François Gigou. I have a background of designer, and since 25 years, I'm leading social innovation and public innovation lab based in Brussels called Strategic Design Scenario. So we are working a lot on research projects within the framework of mainly the Commission, but also local projects on sustainable lifestyles, on transformation of sustainable behaviors. Here, I will speak from maybe a slightly different hat. I'm lead expert for the URBACT programs, which means that URBACT is one instrument depending from the DG Regio and organizing networks of cities that collaborate for 3 years on a specific policy. And I will speak in particular from the Refill the City network, which brought together 10 European cities under the lead of Ghent in Belgium, all trying to develop temporary use policies in their city or in their country or region at different governance level. So I'm not a specialist of creative spaces, although being part of this creative network as a design laboratory, but I will try to give examples from that particular background of how cities were involved in stimulating the temporary use of empty spaces, vacant spaces, and of course, in particular, for this kind of multiple use, including creative use of places.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And it's really important network because it helps the cities to really have this triangle between economic, social, environmental topics. So your presence in our panel is just very much welcome. Thank you.
Nino?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Right? Hi, Lydia. So again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to participate because it's very interesting and quite active subject for us. As a representative of the Achara Group, I will be talking about our projects. At the same time, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Nino Sharashidze. So my background comes from the Film Fund. So I've been working to a lot of international festivals. So I've been participating in the arts and the culture sector, I would say. And already like 2 years, I've been working for the Achara Group, one of the leading Georgian companies. And so we have some kind of recently we made big changes in Achara Group. So this is the first time we're talking publicly about that. So Achara Group itself became very big. So we've been developing hotels and at the same time brownfields and at the same time agripreneurship. So we recently decided to give like all three directions and give a separate direction to Achara Group within the hospitality, and then to develop to create another group of people who will be directly involved into collective development. We call that group. So who will be like in the brownfields, creating hubs, incubators, and so on. So we'll be specifically along with also in the hospitality buildings, creating that buildings on the first stage.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so they're like quite big changes. I have like a small presentation. Would it be possible for me to like share screen now, or do you want me to do it later?
Well, if it's related to the following questions that I have already provided, you can do it later. But if it's just a sort of general presentation, you can do it now, and we will give you additional 2 minutes, for example, if it's okay for you.
Yeah, I'll just quickly share. I'm going to tell you about our projects, which we have been here, and so just going to be like a quick one. So I think I'll just I think the screen sharing is disabled, the host disabled. Yeah, so
then we can also see it as an epilogue to the panel discussion because it will be like promising a message for the future.
Maybe when we start the questions, then by then we will see how to allow you to make the screen, and then you can also share. Yeah.
Okay. So we have some upcoming projects that we're developing. So really into brownfield development and creating this incubator and creative hubs in Georgia and within the Georgia, not only Tbilisi, but we also Kavi. So we're kind of like getting bigger. So it's very important for me to participate here and just like share what we're doing and to get more experienced in this field. So I'm happy again for giving us this opportunity.
Right, thank you. And as we know that business people are very busy, we will triple appreciate your time, especially considering that Achara is really active business company, and we wish other also business companies worldwide to follow up your example. So thank you, Nina, for joining us.
Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you for answering the first row of the question. And so just that the audience knows, we will talk about the challenge that there are not many creative spaces, to say truly, in Georgia. So there are just a couple of them, and we've seen on the international level that the development of such places it really depends on the involvement of all three sectors. It is governmental or public sector, it is a private sector, and it can be really based on the initiatives of civil sector or the NGO sector, so to say. So first three questions will deal with this kind of dimensions. I will ask to all the panelists about the crossover of these dimensions within their projects. I understand that they represent different projects in terms of typology. For example, Nino and Dania represent private and non-governmental sort of sector mainly. On the other hand, Ina represents the regional initiative, and Francois is a policy consultant, but also he represents the youth-supported project. So my first row of the question relates to the public sector and governmental/state support for developing such kind of initiatives. And Tanya, if I could ask you the first question, throughout the lifespan of the Creative Crew workshop, could you recall the governmental and state programs in frames of which you received the support from them? And I'm also very interested what kinds of programs is usually supported by the governmental sector. And after this, I would like also to ask you about the youth support schemes, if Crew Workshop has ever benefited from some sort of youth support programs. Yeah, that is actually my questions for you, and you have approximately 3-4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Niklas. Well, Crew has always been an independent and private project. It means that we took our own funds to found it in 2012. In 2012, nobody knew about co-working. They didn't know how to pronounce the name of co-work, so it was very uncommon in Portugal and in Porto specifically. And now that we are renovating, we still don't find the right the funds to help us out with the renovations. So in Portugal, there is no specific policies for creative hubs. We do have specific politics for cultural and artistic activity, but we, as creative hubs, we fall in a gray area that we are not purely cultural, we are not purely innovation, and we are not purely social, but we have a little bit of the three sectors. And so for you to understand, when we do have some program that we need to have the support or the stamp, let's say, of the municipality or so, and they just push us to the other department, saying, no, it's not really this department, it's the innovation one, and we knock on door on the innovation, and after all it is social. And it's a little bit like this. So it's a little bit frustrating, and we with all the bureaucracies, we kind of killing the attempts of these collaborations. I think this now is a little bit better, but even for small, we fall in this trap. Lately, we had the support of the municipality to organize a bootcamp of 3 days for creative freelancers and solopreneurs. That we wanted to be like really focusing in creative industries challenges, but we had to bring along a little bit of the innovation buzzwords in order to fit the programs, because it's a little bit like that. We are in a gray area, and it's not so simple. In a European level, what we feel is that we are a small organization with not enough financial or even organization capacity to apply to funds like for the creative industries, for example, the Creative Europe or these kind of programs. So normally we benefit from the other bigger organizations like the European Creative Hubs Network, that distributes opportunities to the hubs that are their members. And these opportunities are translated in mobility opportunities or capacity building opportunities, learning opportunities that are very, very important for our developments. But it doesn't translate in funds to create or renovate or start a hub itself. Lately, we do have, because we are building these networks among our European peers, places like us among Europe, we start to form consortiums that are able to apply to smaller projects like Erasmus Plus projects. But with that, we are still starting to build some recognition and some experience in these matters, and I think that's a step-by-step process.
Tanya, sorry, I have just a question. Could you just give us approximate percentage of the public funding that you receive for Cool Cover compared to private funding and commercial activities? Like, what is like approximate?
It depends on each year, because some years we have some projects, like if you have a year that we win a Erasmus Plus project, it can reach like 25% of our income. But we are mainly private, and the sustainability of our hub is mainly based on private funds and our services.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Welcome.
Ina, I will move to you. Well, I have kind of different types of questions related to the public involvement within your project. First of all, it is about the story of this program, because here in Georgia, our main challenge is that we have somehow good international ideas, but then it becomes somehow hard for it to be implemented because there is no sound advocacy campaign. So my wish is somehow to find out how it all really started, because since it's a governmental initiative, so what was the trigger that the third places happen to exist? And then I would like also to ask you if you could comment about the involvement of other regional state agencies that cooperate in the frames of third places. You mentioned that people can also apply to the regional ministry for making their infrastructural works done. And last but not the least is that when it comes to renovating or reactivating state-owned infrastructure, what are some sort of bureaucratic paths that the applicants go? So these are the three questions that I have for you. I hope it's not really confusing. If something is confusing, please ask me, and you have approximately 5 minutes for this, or 5-6 minutes.
I'm trying to find my notes made for your questions. We're still in the second chapter, right?
Yeah, it's the second chapter. It's about the story.
I'll just start with telling the story how this project started. The first idea was of the Conservative Party, of one Conservative Party of our parliament, to start this project. It was part of the coalition agreement then with the different parties in the parliament. But now we have a status where it is widely accepted by almost anybody, because it answered a question and it reacted to a development that everybody had recognized so far. What I already described as the unbalance between urban and rural areas. And to that, it tried to find an answer. And because it did, it also was very quickly and highly accepted by all kinds of associations, the cultural sector, the churches, and so on. Of course, the Ministry of Culture, to achieve their political aim, it was very helpful, for example, to have the Association of Small Towns as a partner. They helped to spread the word about this program and to spread the word about the call for proposals. The ministry itself published articles and went to conferences, held lectures, and so on. And finally, a strategic step was to install this office, which is our office, as a central point where people can turn to and when they are interested in this program. And we made workshops for these interested people and accompanied them on the way through the process of finding out, is this the right program? Are we on a good path, and so on. So that was very crucial. Maybe you could repeat your second questions again.
Yeah. Second question was about, you mentioned this in the interview, when applicants apply for the program third places, they usually receive from you the funding for the development of the skills and programs, but they don't really receive the funding from you for infrastructural development. But then you mentioned that there is some sort of a way that they can apply to other source of funding so that it's coherent. So could you comment a bit about this?
Okay, well, this program is financed by the Ministry of Culture and Science. And of course, their aim is to foster cultural development and cultural programs and not building or reconstructing places, especially not historic sites that are listed, and it takes a lot of money to reconstruct them. Therefore, we have, it's a complementing system of ministry programs, and some of our applicants also apply for money at the Ministry of Urban Development because they have problems, especially for the development of small towns or for monument conservation. And of course, any third place can also apply for money, for funding at the Cultural Ministry for, let's say, regular cultural projects, additionally to the third place.
So it's some sort of threefold approach. They can apply for third places to have this project funded, and then they can apply for small-scale cultural projects, and on the other hand, they can also apply to the regional ministry for infrastructural development.
Yes. Okay. I could give you an example. We have in one place in Löhne, we have a very old railway station that was closed down many, many years ago. It's a very big building. It's right in the center of the city. The money from third places is for the software. It's for the cultural manager organizing everything. It's for the events. It's for network meetings and so on. But the hardware, the stones and bricks and building is paid by the Ministry of Urban Development for building a new entrance situation, turning the large waiting room of this railway station into a concert hall, and fitting in a library in this building and so on. So this complements and it works together, but not always. It's sometimes the way.
Final question is, like, for example, this railway station, it's the city-owned premises, or it's private-owned?
In this case, it's the city's building.
So it means that there are some NGO representatives who thought about the project and they agreed with the city that the city could give them this project. Yes, like not the project but the premises itself.
Either the municipality can be an applicant or NGOs. Both sides work, but in both cases, the one should, by all means, talk to the other. It makes no sense building or a large project without the acceptance of the other sector, because everybody, when they work together, it works best. Everybody brings in different knowledges, expertise, know-how, and so on, and of course, different energies and whatever, contacts, networks. It's best when it comes together.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Francois, I'd like to move to you. So could you describe the role of the local or maybe national government when it comes to the development of creative spaces in terms of temporary use on vacant places that you worked on from the Refill project? So if you could somehow let us know what role can governments play in order to make this process more smooth?
Okay, so the question is a bit tricky because, of course, government can play a lot of role if they are willing to. and Ina and Tanya gave a good example before. Maybe I would like to talk about examples where the government was not providing anything, and how, in fact, a movement started based on temporary use of vacant spaces that lead to forms of support by the government. I understood that your problems in Georgia is that there are no support or nearly no support for creative places, and that's why maybe I would be a bit critical in a certain way. If you have an instrument that provides money, it's great. But what do you do when you don't have an instrument like that? I would like to take the example of Nantes in France, more or less in central west of France, which is quite a middle-sized, big city, which had a huge brownfield right in the middle of a city in an island, and they installed their redevelopment agency there, and this was that's to be understood as, I mean, it was a big bankruptcy of the main ship industry in the city in the 70s, so it leaves a very strong scar in that city. So that place, right in the middle, on an island, on the river, huge, was totally abandoned and totally not seen at all by the population because of reminding of this industrialization very difficult moment. So a lot of empty building and an intelligent, I think, the Samoa, the development agency, very intelligently said, okay, we are there in the middle of nowhere. We could open this building in a way. And frankly speaking, they did it a little bit, little by little, trying to without a real framework given by the city or by the state on that, just because they feel it could be nice to not be lonely in that place. And for 10 years, this place slowly opened to artists, to a lot of cultural initiatives. And after 10 years, the city, I mean, after 10 years, it was really the place, one of the place to be in that area for our development and etc. And what I really value in this experience is that after 10 years, the city said, okay, what do we have here? We have a creative district, but it's not the type of creative district what was decided in a top-down way. You know that, I mean, I'm glad to hear Ina and Tina saying that they are successful experience, but we could also provide a lot of unsuccessful experience where money and effort were spent because, I mean, suddenly a government, a city decided to create a creative place, and it did not work because you don't create a creative place. There is a different attitude of letting go in a certain way, of letting it go, a creative place. So to make it short, they recognize that a creative place, or even more than a place, a creative district, because it's a real neighborhood, now has been developed with, I cannot say a phenomenon of gentrification because there was nobody living there. So there is not these difficult issues of gentrification. And the city now has decided to push the design school, the architecture school, a lot of creative industry to settle there. to facilitate again this installation instead of designing it from top down. And that's very important, because for me, I mean, in your three type of questions, I think that it's, as your program from UNESCO and EU is named, it's an ecosystem, and there is not one which for me should start. Of course, if he's willing to, that's great. But what happens when nobody is really starting? So I think that this is beyond funding, beyond a voluntary top-down way of making things happen. Here it's a letting go to the civil society, to a large range of actors, and now it's really the center of this city, which is successful in terms of culture, of tourism, or even mass tourism, in a positive sense, and a lot of creative industries.
So we're going to come back to you in a little while with another question. So now maybe other colleagues to join. Yeah. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. Super.
I'll ask Nino the same question. Like, does Agera Group has in its portfolio some sort of cases when government provided some kind of support, whether it is some sort of discount on the property or maybe direct support for some cultural programs in the premises of the creative spaces that you run? So anything you could tell us about the relationships between Agera Group and the government? It's really interesting for us.
That's a tricky question, at the same time very obvious, because we have we don't, like, government is not giving that much money to the private sectors, of course, within the Georgia. So we don't have any tax incentives, we haven't received any of them. Even one of the buildings we bought on the auction at a very high price. So again, we do have some differences between the private and the governmental like funding, in terms of funding. So we at some point we do find it, we want to some kind of collaborate with them. We want them to see, as we see the development of the brownfields and creative hubs in Georgia, so we want also to collaborate with them. We indirectly, for example, we have as kind of EBRD and, like, for example, OPIC, and those, like, the banks, the international banks, who have been, like, in terms of they have supported us in any other ways, for example. But on the other hand, I would say that we don't have any support from them.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Lydia, I'm giving the floor to you so that you can discuss further the role of the private sector within the initiatives of our panelists, and then I will come back with the civil sector dimension. So, floor is yours.
Thank you. I think it's almost the middle of our discussion, and I would like to once again repeat that this project is absolutely great because it's supported by UNESCO and the European Commission, and it's trying to look at reinventing support mechanisms for all this development of creative cluster ecosystems in Georgia. So this is why we're together, because we're looking at different options. We're looking at new models. We're looking at public-private partnership and also the support of the third sector to help our friends here in the future get much, much better support mechanisms for the sector. So once again, thanks to UNESCO and European Commission, we are able to bring all these experts from different countries. We're going to move to the, as Nicola said, to the private sector. What is the role of the private sector? How you work with it? Is it just because they are supporters as donors, or maybe in a kind of a partnership, or maybe angel investors, or probably some of the, for example, companies which are supported by you come from the private sector? So these are the bunch of questions we are going to look at. And my question is to Ina to start with. Because you have a very interesting example of a place where you support projects. Are some of them coming from private ownership? And also, what is your connection with the businesses in general, in terms of maybe some corporate philanthropy or corporate support, or maybe co-partnership together with you? So what would you tell us as such kind of options from your experience?
Okay, the spaces that are planned for or become third places are sometimes owned by the municipalities. I mean, we even have small castles, we have libraries, we have cultural centers, but quite often we have a private owner. That is the case perhaps if the third place is planned for an historic pub that is vacant, or a church, or a shop in the city center. And these places are usually rented by the third places group from the private owner. So the owner can be a donor if he lets down the rent or just takes a small rent. But in any case, he makes a profit. And because the third places program runs at least over 3 years, sometimes 4 years, it's very attractive for private owners to have the rent safe. Because if they had a vacancy before, that's very attractive. So far, the private sector, it does play a role, but not yet as much as it could. I would say at the moment, third places is regarded for local companies, to speak, as yet another program, another cultural project, knocking on the door and saying, would you please give us a little bit of your money? But I could imagine that this will change over the years when this program is successful in the small towns to implement themselves and to really have an effect, not only to become a cultural hub, but also with social effects, really being a meeting point for different groups, different people, and revitalizing this town center. Because of this is attractive for companies too. We have an area here in North Rhine-Westphalia that has many hidden champions, really globally active companies who watch very carefully what is happening in their hometowns, because if culturally there is nothing offered, they cannot attract good employees. And so I could imagine that this constellation will change over the years. And also we have quite smart groups in third places who, for example, are active to produce podcasts for local companies, which themselves cannot organize such things, but they have a lot of know-how technically, and there's a lot going on. And what is also interesting, we have some third places. I have to remind that this program just started. We have 17 places funded right now in the moment, and next year we will have, well, I can't say right now, it's secret, but many more. And we already see that there are cooperatives established, and that civic foundations are involved. And that is very interesting. And it shows that for the founders of third places, this idea of community and of democratic ways of coming to conclusions and making decisions is very, very important. And that makes me quite sure that the role of third places will even grow over the years.
Very good, very good. So we see good trends, although it's maybe a long path to go. But these are some seeds which show that business sectors are not ignorant. And you're absolutely right of what you said, that the social goal is very important. It's not just the business partnership. So thank you very much for making this specific focus. Tanya, this amazing place which you're so passionately working on and developing, what is the business support around? Do you really feel it? Is it so hard? Do you find some private donations or any other ways by which the business sectors are supporting, or they're just not really looking at these spaces because obviously they look at products much more than processes, and what you do is a process? Any patronage business models which you might be maybe feeling? So what is your impression about that?
Well, regarding this matter, I must say that in the beginning, when we opened, we tried to get some sponsorships and try to make the bridge with some private companies. But as I said before, it was a sector in such an early stage that was not fancy or trendy enough to get the support of the companies. And also it was not big enough to represent numbers that were attractive for this kind of donations. Also, the systems that we have in Portugal about tax support for companies, or this kind of incentives to companies and private sector to support the creative and cultural sector, is must have a lot of bureaucracies and obstacles. Like you need to have 3 years of work, so it's not directed for young organizations. You have to have the status of the how to say public utility in order to have the status for receiving this kind of donations, and the private sector have the benefits of donates to these cultural organizations. So it's not so simple for organizations that are just starting. It's almost impossible. So we kind of gave up.
Is it positive from your perspective?
Sorry?
Is it positive? How do you see the future?
Well, there's a reason to be like that also. So I understand that organization also have to prove the value of the work that is doing in order to have the access of this statue and have the access of these kind of systems. I think crew is growing for that. Probably we will try again this kind of contact, especially for the new programs that we are foreseeing having in 2021. One is the creative mentorship program that we are learning the know-how from Serbia partner, and we want to implement in Portugal. And for that project, we really want to involve the private sector. Let's say, let's have a meeting in half a year, and I will say how it was. But yeah, regarding the patronage system, when we closed doors in March and April during the lockdown, we established, so we are pretty much based on space, and the space is something that is very, very valuable to us, and it's kind of the base for all our services around our community and our neighborhood. And during the lockdown, we had to find ways of staying relevant even without the space. And we create digital memberships for our members, for our community, and for our residents. And while doing it, we really open our eyes to our position and to our value. And that is not always directed, direct, but also indirect. And for this start to build them, that is almost like a crowdfunding, but in long term. So it's memberships that people can donate monthly and can receive some of the services we are building that are more digital and can break the barrier of the physical space. If you have it, great. It's always good to have our peers and to be social and to have people in the same house. But if not, for some reason, like a pandemic, we need to find other ways of keeping this bond with our community members.
Thank you, Tanya. I see you're ready to write a whole article about that.
Let's see.
Come back to you. Thanks so much. So let's move to François to ask what, in your opinion, is not just the business support for projects, but for the overall creative ecosystem, as we call it? It's maybe also a question for a PhD research, but from your practice, and maybe also bringing us some examples about that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I will take examples from another city, and I will take example from Bremen in Germany, which was part of a refill adventure. Here, it's a good example of some things that has been created in between the private, the public, and the civil society. So it's an independent agency called ZZZ, Zwischenzeitzentrale, which is a sort of the meanwhile space equivalent to, in terms of the meaning of this acronym. We try to waken the sleeping building. Zwischenzeitzentrale is ZZZ, so it's the noise that people do when they are snoring, and it's they are an independent agency that has been applying for a call from the city to externalize this function in a certain way. Instead of having a real estate temporary use agency inside the city, thinking that the administration of the city of Bremen will not be flexible enough, will not be agile enough to do that, they externalize it to a structure for a batch of 4 years with a budget for financing the activity of this very light structure, 3-4 people, that are in charge of hunting for vacant building, of convincing owners, and of facilitating any kinds of project. And here again, not only creative, artistic project, even if they represent quite a lot, but social, educational projects, sustainable projects that are looking for spaces. So they are also ecosystemic in their aim from the beginning. Their support in the city, their steering committee is also multi-sectorial, from the culture, from the economy, which help them to make link between different aspects. And the two last points that I wanted to say on that example is that the city give this mission to a bunch of activists, of young architects at that time that apply to this call for offer, but that were at the same time the one who were making the nice trouble, if I may say, you know, the activists, the positive, constructive activists, but activists. And I really think it's interesting as an example for showing other cities in Georgia and other administration in Georgia to have the courage to give this mission to people that are really different from a public administration, because and I think that it's clear for Bremen, because I mean an administration cannot do that. That's not the link and so on. And just little small example. I think that I hope that my friends from ZZZ will not blame me on disclosing this little detail, but they have a part of a budget which is given to support, to give seed money to all the temporary users. And for the moment, when we worked with them, they had a bit of a trouble because they were not able to spend that budget. And that's very important, because most of the time public authority thinks that what they can provide is provide money. And here, the testimony of ZZZ experience in supporting a lot of temporary users from cultural but other sectors also is that they are not requesting money. They are requesting support, technical support, support to their own project, and especially support for the paper work, if I may say.
Nice, very, very nice point. I'm going to stop you here. Merci beaucoup. Because we're going to come back to you in the last part of our panel. I would like to move to Nino, because Jara Group is really an example, and I would like to ask in two perspectives. One of them is, how do you really help practically to the cultural organizations, especially and cultural people, especially, for example, providing them with such benefits for renting or other places, because your properties have really open spaces for creatives. And also, how do you work with other companies, with other businesses? Do you have some partnership? Do they follow what you do? In other way, how do you really motivate them that they do similar or even more things like a Jara Group, which, by the way, is mentioned in our two papers which we did with Nicholas, because before the panel, this is also an important thing to say, we elaborated research on the creative clusters worldwide, internationally. Who are they? What are they? How are they supported? And we also gave example of a Jara Group. And also, what is the ecosystem and also possible options for Georgia? So, yes, so could you please share with us?
Thank you very much, Lydia. Well, on our example, it's quite, I think, what I'm looking through right now into creative hubs and all this networking. I think I can say that we are kind of exceptional, because it is also based on and is a huge role of our owner and the visionary of Temur Gulaba, who is directly involved, and who is I think this is his interest. Apart from like business, what he's doing in the hospitality that we created, like Georgian unique brands and the hotels. Again, all of them we have been collaborating with the locals and the Georgians. It can be like artists, architects, designers. And so this is the main thing when we start doing some kind of, any kind of a project. We always think that, is it for locals? Are they going to come? Will they be interesting for them? Will they participate? Will it be like convenient for them? Is it going to be affordable sometimes? Like, it depends on the environment. And so everything, we pay a lot of attention to that details, I would say. Again, all the spaces that we created, on the example of the Fabrica, which is one of the first the huge project that we did with the MUA architects, the Georgian architects here, that the multicultural and multifunctional space. At the same time, hostel, first ever hostel that we created in Georgia, and the courtyard, which attracts all the shops and the bars and the crafts people. And this was like a first ever example of this kind of creative hub in Tbilisi and in Georgia itself, to be that popular and that successful. So after that, we have seen this is the need, and this is what Georgian young generation, youth and creative sector needs. And then again, we started going to the direction. Even the hotels that we have opened here, for example, right now I'm in the Rooms Hotel, Istanbul Hotel. Both of them used to be like old propaganda, Soviet that was we had this rebirth of the building. We gave it a different kind of a perspective. We changed differently, and we had the reuse of the buildings. So this is very important topic for us, and this is what we're really trying to go through. And this is where we see a lot of potential. Even now, like working on this upcoming projects that we're doing and developing these spaces and brownfields, we come up a lot of challenges. It's not just like from the private sector I'm talking. This is not just like giving it a funding or just to, okay, you this fund and you develop it. This is very like a tricky thing. You have to trust this and you have to make it, because like I just wanted to say, this is my opinion, that for example, easy money is never something that works, like I on the examples, like when you see, like even myself, when we try to work on something and you're just going to one direction, to the other one, going to the one fund, then the other one. So you're just motivating. Once you get this money drops down, so then you need like a little bit of exercises. So creating this ecosystem that all of you mentioned, I think it's very, very important. Even now, like entering to a new building, you see this brownfield, which is abandoned. There's nothing happening, to see what's going to happen there, how to create the spaces there, how to adapt it, who has to be there, where we have to allocate those people, how they're going to be the synergy between them. Will they just collaborate with them? Will they hate each other? Will they be like, like this is all something you have to think before you just put the building on the map.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. And by the way, when I met you first time, I was really impressed that a person with cultural sensitivity can work for a business company. So I think you're one of those spots where such kind of a cross collaboration is actually very possible. So thank you so much. Very nice of you. So Nika, I'm going back to you for the last part of questions that are related to NGOs.
Yeah, so actually it is before the last one. The last one is about the sustainability and cross-disciplinarities, but considering our time frame, I will try my best to be as fast as possible.
To join them together, because
we have discussed the dimension of public sector and government. We have discussed some sort of commitment of private sector in each case. Now we came, I guess, for me, is the core dimension of any creative initiative to be developed. It's a civil sector or NGO sector. We might also synonymously call it like this. So Tanya, first I have the question to you. Could you somehow identify yourself and the crew initiative as the result of some sort of civil initiative on the one hand, and also could you somehow tell us how crew enables civil initiatives to be emancipated in the framework of your premises? So just if you could comment about this.
Yeah, sure. So co-working and a creative hub is all about community building and nurturing this belonging idea and creating a safe space for experiment, to create, to be social. And of course, this kind of environment triggers the sense of getting together to do things that in other ways cannot be done. Crew is also an example of that. Like for instance, for us to fulfill our mission, we have created a company, of course, with the more for-profit branch and a non-profit to fulfill our mission of promoting art and creativity and supporting creative entrepreneurship. And this was born in the middle of the way. It was not think in beginning. It's something that happened. Also, Crew is also a epicenter of a confluence point for the creative ecosystem, and also for our neighborhood that is an art district. And this means that people feel safe to come here and to create. Like last year, we had this Sustainable Design New Association, an NGO for sustainable design development in the region. That is mainly formed by people that make part of Crew, so Crew designers. There are almost 16 people that are the founders of this association. And we also began also a trigger for the neighborhood that is now getting together and making an association also for the neighborhood, for the local development of this art district. Because something that I forgot to mention before, this art district that we are integrated in, and we already have some actions, collective actions, to promote this part of the city. That is also supported by the municipality. Like, for instance, all the art galleries open their new exhibitions. We have like 20-something galleries open at the same time, and the city hall just helps to resonate these happenings during the year. So I think our creative hub is is a place for these kind of
thank you so much.
energies.
Yeah, thank you. François, I would like to ask you about, you mentioned this case with the architects who were usually protesting against the urban policies. You mentioned this example, if I'm not mistaken. So when we talk about the civil society and how can be they use as being a trigger for developing such kind of processes, could you tell us a bit more about this case when these architects could grasp the power to develop the policies and initiatives?
I don't know if he grasped the power, as you say. I want to be, I mean, a little bit more general. I think that from the experience of the 10 cities participating in Refill, we saw that there was an issue on matchmaking, on making the match between the owners and the temporary users, but also making it in a way that is meaningful for the owner, whether they are private or public. So we start a matchmaking process, which was piloted in Cluj in Romania, then in Ghent in Belgium and in Poznan. And to make it really short, because time is short now, I will send you in the chat the link to the article with make it in detail. But we make a real matchmaking, a typical boy meets girl matchmaking between department of a public administration of a city and various groups of social or cultural or educational or sustainable initiatives. And the idea is that we did not make a matchmaking between the city and those groups, but between different services of the city. So what the city on streets and traffic can do with this association who is working on street art. What this, and it was organized as a matchmaking, so very quick. We sit 5 minutes together. What kind of business, what kind of contract, what kind of new value creation model we can do. We are a makerspace, you are an education service. What can we do together? And this is very important because generally, I mean, now I will be maybe criticized by the co-panelists, but a lot of cultural or social initiatives, they want support, but they are not trying to see what they can give as support. So a makerspace need a space to install its activity, but a makerspace is very useful for a city as, for example, an education support to the school, because schools can go there and see 3D printers and see things that are not in the school. Unemployed people are using this makerspace to find a certain way, an integration in the work environment and so on and so on. So this matchmaking process has been made and was really successful in trying to see each other, not one as a donor supporting the other one as a requester, but both, and encouraging generally the weakest part, or the supposed weakest part, to see itself as a potential supporter for the city, and therefore to trigger real support. Because, I mean, if I am a department of a city, you don't give me any interest in that, okay, if I have money, I can distribute it. But if I have a pain in my neck, and that you, cultural association, can help me in what I cannot do, then it triggers a totally different relationship.
I play the role of a gatekeeper and timekeeper. And I see the passion of François. Thank you so much.
Nino, I have a very concrete question. Like in the previous question, you talked about your relationship with the private companies, but since Agera Group consists with many initiatives initiated by the arts professionals and creative professionals who originally represent civil society, could you comment about this, or how does the manager, how does the Temur or you deal with these people, creative professionals? Like, is it some sort of top-down approach? You have some sort of official meetings, or it is just randomly meeting with each other and coming up with some creative ideas? Nino?
I was on mute, sorry.
Okay.
So again, this is very interesting question. At the same time, I'm gonna answer I'm gonna have an ordinary answer, because everybody is on their way. I mean, we're just giving those people, like most of them, we're giving a free spaces here. For example, at Stamba, and we do sometimes apply additional funding to them as well. And so those people are by themselves. Nobody controls them. Nobody's, we're not involved in their activities. We're just trying to be a part, and we're just trying to give them freedom, and they'll go on their way. But and then afterwards they have this, we're also giving them the space to organize, for example, like art fairs. In-house we have Tbilisi Multimedia and Photography Museum, which is also running by itself, and they have their own managers, and they have their own small teams that they're really working actively and doing a very quality-wise content in any kind of a way. So again, we're just trying to avoid it and try to be not to get involved in their activities. So, but the new buildings that we are now developing, we have like all of them are different. All the projects are different. Mm-hmm. So right now we want those the people who we're gonna include in these creative hubs, and we're going to talk to them. So we want them to be self-sustainable. We want them to develop this machine that's going to be working, and then afterwards they're going to create their own. So it's going to be like incubator. So we're really working on that direction right now.
Ina, I will move to you, but I will also somehow merge this question with the next section's question, because we have a small amount of time. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, like, from the statistics, if you could tell us, like, is there at least one project where the NGO sector or civil sector is totally absent? It's just my question. And then if you could comment about the cross-disciplinarity and value chain and self-sustainability, about these ideas. So how do you ensure that when projects apply, what are your criteria to somehow measure and identify that these projects will be self-sustainable in the future? I know that it's quite huge topic, and it can't be discussed in 3 minutes. It's absolutely ridiculous. But still, if you could give us the main messages regarding these ideas. Yeah,
I'm trying to be brief, and maybe it helps. I made some notes on this one because this is very important.
Yes.
No, there is no third place that works without including the civic society and NGOs. It's crucial, and it wouldn't be a third place if it wasn't so simple as that. And as for the questions, what we look at your question was what do we look at to make applications sustainable? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
I have pinned down 9 points, and as questions: has been ensured by either buying or building or by legal contract that the space for the third place can be used for many years. That has to be sustainable. Then second, is the project embedded in a strategy by the town concerning town development or cultural development? Has to be answered by the applicants, this question. Then the next question is the town's administration involved if it's an NGO that applies for the program? And are the employees in the administration really willing to help you? How can you document this? Has there been meetings, appointments, commitments, letters of intent, and so on? Are many different partners, both from the public and the private sector, involved? Who and how? Has a broad participation process taken place? Please describe this to me. That's a question in the application form too. If it hasn't taken place, that's not good looking at other applicants. Then, are the protagonists of this project really open for new ideas is a very important question. Are they willing to share responsibilities with others? And also, it's a question of power, of course, who decides over this third place. Then, do the participants, the groups involved, look enough at the revenue side of their project? Do they have an idea how to get along after years without funding? Do they have any concept of making money? That's a question that we ask. And we ask for a very precise, or as precise as possible, business plan. That, of course, you can imagine, many say, okay, that's too much, but you have to really think yourself into this project to make an application. And then the last point that I want to say is, if there are different offerings like courses and events, concerts, and gastronomy and so on, does it seem to us as observing these applications like a side-by-side next to each other concept, or do we have the feeling by reading the script that they really plan to work together? That's crucial too. And these are the questions that we have in mind when we read the applications, and where we decide. It's a jury that decides. So yes, I think these questions show that we definitely encourage cross-disciplinary thinking and exercise. And that's also one of the bigger challenges for people to leave sectoral thinking in departments or just their network and their topics.
Great. I think this is going to help us also in Georgia to look at new models of support of such kind of places. So that was really important what you shared. Thank you.
Definitely. When we will subtitle this video and publish it once again, I will put some hyperlinks related to the third places, and also, Francois, what you mentioned, like matchmaking articles, so that the people will be able to somehow follow further information. So, Tanya, when it comes to co-creative space, could you tell us the main ideas, what strengthens the self-sustainability of the organization? So I'm really interested here in terms of the value chain. So how commercial and non-commercial departments help with each other so that the crew itself is sustainable.
So after some years of running crew, we found out that because we don't have the social enterprise legal figure in Portugal, like otherwise other countries have. So the best way we found is to divide it in two branches, the profit one and non-profit one. The profit one is all the activities that help us to be sustainable, and are more related to the space and to, let's say, more real estate business, like rental of working space, co-working space, meeting rooms, studios, this kind of activities, and also encompasses some educational activities that we provide for cultural associations, for municipalities, and so on. The non-profit branch, we use it for fulfill our mission. So as our mission is support of the creative industries, freelancers and solopreneurs. We have a lot of educational activities and meetups and workshops that are under this umbrella of an association, an NGO, that we created to work side by side with our company. And also for organizing, we do 6 exhibitions, art exhibitions a year, conferences for creative professionals, and these are the activities that fulfill our mission but are supported by this non-profit NGO. About cross-disciplinarity, our community is very diverse. We have architects, illustrators, designers, in terms of the diversity, it constitutes a pool of talents that for projects, we are drinking from that pool and picking out people that constitutes this community of professionals. And also this pool creates a lot of impact in the city, because people join and efforts, they work together, they start new businesses together that will take our synergies here from other parts of the city that contaminates, it's not a good word nowadays, but it contaminates other parts of the city with these actions that we start here.
Thank you very much. Francois, I'd like to ask you if you could recall from this Urbach-Treffel experience the case when this space hosted different sort of cultural disciplines, because in Georgia we have a challenge that on one hand we might have some sort of infrastructure and there are some sort of creative spaces like cafes and studios and co-work spaces, but they don't really necessarily co-work with each other. So if you could recall about the platform where different components not only provided the services to the general public, but they also were hand in hand with each other and they strengthened each other.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are what we just in the frame of Lille, World Design Capital organized an exhibition, but a conference on multiple places. So what we call multiple places are places which economy is based on an economy of scope rather than an economy of scale. So multifunctional places, and that's probably the key of their sustainability, their economic sustainability, of requesting a right mix. And I fully agree on your question, because generally this makes sort of complicated structure, because we are doing a lot of different things, and typically the public administration of a city has difficulty to read them, to understand that they are a real economy of scope, a real value creation model with a sustainability, which certain parts are completing the others. So now to come back to your question, I would quote the example of a city of Ghent, who was leading a refill network, where they had an old library, the central library of a city, and they 7,000 square meter empty building for 8 months, and they asked for a huge market between more than 240 initiatives, associations in the city, to make a project at the scale of a building and at the scale of a city. So to make it short, the matchmaking process of that is very interesting, is described in the article I shared. But to arrive to the end, the result, it provided a huge fab lab at the scale of the city with more than 30 association initiatives, very diverse, that were hosted in this place, and were managing this place for the city within not only 30 single associations altogether, but 30 associations that were able to present themselves as a global project and to answer to the tender of a temporary use application of a city. So that question, the city of Ghent had that in mind from the beginning, saying, okay, we don't want to host only little bits. We want these little bits, and we want to help these little bits to form a consortium that will have more quality and that will answer questions at the size of a city and not at their own size.
Thank you very much. I constantly have this question, like how, and I want to ask and ask, but we don't have any more time. So it's a final row. Nino, I will ask you still from this, like this question, like how do you expect your tenants, if you could call like this, that they are self-sustainable in the future, or it's somehow okay for Agera Group to have some sort of portfolio for non-commercial projects that will fund this kind of projects like on yearly basis, or you push them somehow to be self-sustainable?
I mean, this is something that we're working right now. At the moment, we fully invest in say, like all the projects that we're developing, starting from the equipment, finishing the building itself and everything. So we're doing it on our account, I would say. But we're also like helping them to have a proper business model. So we want to advocate them, we want to support them in that way, and to share our experience with them, and for them to have a proper business model in terms of not to like be just only on the business, but have also like creative. So we're really trying to support them in that way as well. So, and also to advocate them in terms of for the international, it can be like US or EU funds for them to apply. So we do have some local, for example, I'm sure British Council, GIZ, all these international organizations that are working right here. We want to start talking to them right now, because this is something that new. We started working because before that, the Agera Group was one main company who was doing the hospitality, creating this the 7 hubs, and so on and so on. So we split, and so we will be now working on this process to make it more easy, accessible, and we want to also we just really want to collaborate with the public, the government, so everybody. If we, the private and the government and the public sectors won't be involved, this thing is gonna not work properly. So the ecosystem that we're trying to create within these buildings that we're developing, we want also to make it within the country. So because it is very crucial right now. So again, I want to thank you for the Creative Georgia and the UNESCO and Lydia, everybody who's involved. So this is to raise the awareness, to raise this issue in Georgia. It's very important, and also to have all of your experience. And right now, I'm doing a lot of research. I've been going through your websites and visiting everything. So for us, any kind of recommendation or how to any kind of recommendation, I would say, is more than welcome to share with us. So
thank you so much, Nino. Thank you so much. So it's final what I would like to ask you, and then I will give the floor to Lydia. I know that
I have some notes.
Yeah, I know that you did not really have the chance to get the holistic information about the ecosystem of creative industries in Georgia, but based on our last month's relations and the interviews, are there any specific messages or recommendations maybe that you could have to us as a civil sector, but also to the private sector of Georgia, and what's most importantly to the public and governmental sector? If there is some that you have, but if you don't have any other comments, that's also okay. And yeah, so Ina, if you could, yeah.
I think
it's $1 million question, but the future is going to pay you back. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to say you can very well compare Georgia to North Rhine-Westphalia a few decades ago, because we had the coal mining industry here as the strong economic force. Then we had a structural transformation. We had a shift in our economy, and we have had many brownfields, many empty buildings, waiting for a new life. And today we have an extraordinary value added by having filled in these brownfields and buildings, culture, and by tourism encouraged through culture. That's very, very important, and I would encourage Georgia to look at our transformation, maybe to adopt something for the future. That's the one thing. And of course, what you cannot read, but I'm living here, it affects the life of people and the identity as living in this area. It changed our whole way of self-esteem. And that's a high potential and a social effect too that cannot be underestimated. And to the third places program, I think I want to stress out only 4 things that are transferable to other projects too. It has a central office where people can turn to and speak to real people, and they are personally accompanied in their process from a very early stage on. The second thing is the funding works as a 2-phase model. The first phase is making a concept, and they are only funded for 3 more years if the concept is good enough. And we help them as much as we can, and we accompany them. So, and this 2-phase structure is very successful, I think. And the project lasts 3 or 4 years. That's a long time, and it gives a good perspective for everybody involved. And it makes a lot of things can be planned. And second, the last very important point is this ministry in North Rhine-Westphalia from the very beginning stressed out that this program is meant to be experimental. It was looking for new ideas, and it always said it is no problem to make mistakes. Failure is accepted. We are looking for failure because that's a learning process, and nobody gets arrested for making mistakes. That's a very good message, I think.
Thank you very much. I think it was really nice. Thank you. Tanya, if you have any comments.
Yeah. Just 2 things, I believe. One of it is maybe trying to involve the educational institutions, because when there's no money, the universities can play an important role especially to map what already exists in Georgia. I think mapping is a very, very important exercise because it's really makes clear what exists and what conditions are the existing venues, organizations, dynamics, infrastructures, etc. And then I would recommend to start to, if there's money from the government, to start to invest to support in these existing structures, or instead of making this top-down creation of art districts or creative and cultural districts, as Francois was mentioning earlier. Another thing that I think it's very, very important and very positive, and we have this experience in the Creative Hubs Network organization, is the mobility of the people that have the potential to be important stakeholders in these matters. The mobility and the peer-to-peer learning is very, very important. There's Georgia is included in most of the programs that European Union is and the European Commission is providing. So this is important because people create trust among other peers in Europe, and this trust solves a lot of day-to-day and practical problems, and also can be the start of a new collaboration in an international level. That is, I think it's very important for small organizations to have this international support and international perspective of growing. And last thing I can think about is sometimes the existing players in the cities, the stakeholders, the creative and cultural organizations are very spread and they are not interconnected between them. And if they are interconnected between them, they have a different potential for them. So the supporting of creating networks and creating communities among these players are very important. It's very, very common that in the same city, that people like me knows a person in another part of the Europe, but does not knows personally the players that are doing the same thing in the same city. And that's a very potential wasted.
Thank you very much. Francois, is it anything you could recommend to us?
Yes. Lessons learned from Refill for me are, in your perspective, start by the doing. as Ghent has started some 10 or more years ago with flagship projects. So start doing stuff, trying. I mean, as an experiment, it's not a problem, as was just said before. If you fail, nobody will blame you if you have a little things that doesn't work, but try first. Don't focus public authority on subsidies, but or non-financial support. I mean, opening up empty building, public building is a lot of sleeping money when public authority don't have money, and we were in the middle of a huge COVID crisis, which is very, very difficult for public authority. So try to spot this sleeping money. Then try to see you as a support to your supporter. Try to see cultural initiatives, social initiatives as being supported by public or private sector, but also by being supporter of issues that public authority, in particular, may have. So just to finish, it's not a page of advertisement, but the Urbact project are there to facilitate learning between the 10 participating cities of a network. But I encourage you to see the output, because the output is exactly a toolbox, if I may say. It's called a journey toward through temporary use, where you have all the tools and experience from these 10 cities made as a toolbox for cities that had not the chance to participate to this experience to start their own journey through temporary use. I will send you the link also in the chat.
Thank you very much. Is there something you could recommend to the civil society sector and also to the government, since you represent the private sector itself?
Yes, for sure. I would say that their involvement is very crucial, because once the government is involved, everything goes very smoothly if they support. So we have seen in Georgia many successful cases in terms of not just about the creative economy, but also industrial parts, so financing micro businesses and so on. So I think this is not something that Georgians cannot do, for sure. This is something that we can do, and we're more than willing to do it. So I think talking about it more often, having more statistics what creative industries can do, because on our example, starting from even the hotels that we opened first in 2010. So these were some of the jobs they were not that popular. So after we created these hotels, we created the Georgian first ever brands. So then some of the jobs came up, appeared. So this is something that we saw the potential, and so this is what we're looking for right now, just creating this ground and making it as smooth as possible, and then at some point they come to us. So again, not just like a government, but the other private sectors have to see it, because this is, I think, all the roads lead to us, which is very good, of course, and what we are really proud of, and what we are really keen on doing that. But again, like other companies should be we are more than welcome to share our ideas, and we're more than welcome the other creative hubs to appear on the map and to be as much more collaborative as possible. So I think this is something that we have to look through.
Thank you all for the involvement, and now I give the floor to Lydia, who will resume the panel discussion. Thank you again, Lydia.
Wonderful. Yeah. So hard to summarize, so I'm going to try very, very quickly. What I heard from this almost 2 hours, several important things about building up this ecosystem of development of creative clusters and spaces and hubs. Social community involvement, diversity matters. many of you mentioned about that. The third one, multidisciplinarity, experimental character. We are not just about the products, we are about the processes. The fourth one I heard a lot is openness, sharing and learning from each other, because you see how rich experiences each one of us have. The fifth one, what you mentioned several times, is the long-term visions, the strategies, the consortiums, many other ways by which we build up this partnership in a triangle, public, private sector, and the NGOs. The seventh one, what I heard, was about creativity, because all these spaces, they exist to really boost the creativity, to really make all the people who are creative in a city, in a place, and the communities to come together. So the notion of creative city and creative placemaking, even it was not mentioned explicitly, was in all your sharings. And the last two, what I heard, which is also very nice, is about the change makers and the troublemakers. I think we all who work in the creative clusters area and all these hubs and creative places are both, because we are also social innovators, not just about businesses, as Nino said, but also about social innovation, filling these empty spaces with creativity. And the last recipes and lessons learned, I would like to also summarize mapping the brownfields. And we're also happy that we're going to share with you very soon the findings of Nicholas about the mapping of brownfields in Georgia. Also the fact that failures are possible. There is no punishment, two of you mentioned that. The bottom-up approach, which is let's really see what the communities want and what the people want, where the resources are, and then just take this energy and lift it up. The mobility, peer-to-peer learning, which is building a trust, very important thing. And the last two is about connecting the dots in the city, which also is very important. Plus, focusing on in-kind support and trying to really look at these new models of partnership that brings multiplication effect for the future of each one of us. So we're really happy that Creative Georgia facilitated that, and again, through the support of UNESCO and European Commission, for really looking at new support mechanisms for creative clusters in Georgia. I'm also happy that we didn't mention much about the global pandemic, about all these troubles which we are facing, because I do believe that this energy and creativity will never die, and I'm absolutely sure that each one of us can sign behind this statement. I also do believe that there will be a moment soon that we're going to get together in a real physical round table with some nice drinks, with a cup of tea, and with Georgian food probably, to continue this conversation. So with all my thanks for this wonderful afternoon. Stay healthy, stay happy, and until very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Nicholas.
Bye.
Thank you. I will provide this summary with the email, so you will have this. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.